Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I hope you enjoyed previous sessions, and I hope that you'll enjoy this one as well. And of course, the one that's going to be about Kubernetes tomorrow. I remind you that this session is going to be recorded, so if you want to revisit it later, then you'll be able to do it on our YouTube channel. Please answer to the opening poll because we want to find out more about your experience using OData. Meanwhile, I would like to start by introducing ourselves. Razvan, Chief Solutions Architect in Yonder. I've been here for more than 11 years, and I had the chance to develop applications in all the major technologies, starting from .NET, Java, Python, and front-end technologies, but also I've been developed or being involved in developing applications in all platforms, starting from desktop to cloud and mobile. In the past years, my role in Yonder actually allowed me to be very active in the initial phase of collaboration with our customers. So it's the fun part where everything is being planned and decided, starting from the architecture, technology stack, and the way of working. And together with me is my colleague Vlad, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Vlad. I'll apologize from the beginning if my voice will break down. I've just got the flu a couple of days ago, so you might hear my voice making funny noises. I apologize for that. Well, I'm a software architect in Yonder, working in Yonder for the past 6 years. I must say that I have a .NET heart. Yeah, in the past 6 years, I've been on a journey where I've learned a lot, from front-end technologies to joining the dark side of Java. And beside that, also being involved in initial prospects with customers where we see different businesses and different problems to solve. I must say that I love challenges. And on a personal note, I want to mention that I'm an adrenaline junkie. During winters, I love going to ski. Usually in February, the managers from Yonder are trembling because I like to ski at high speeds, like 120 kilometers per hour. And beside that, I like to have funny shirts. So if you pass by, please check my t-shirt. I also know that Razvan has a few things at his belt on a personal note too.
What are you wearing today?
Well, today it's just my t-shirt that says that I'm not stubborn. It's just that my way is better.
Nice. I'm also an adrenaline junkie. So during summer, I'm usually traveling with a motorcycle around Europe. Good. So now that you know something about us, let's also find out if you have any experience with OData. So hope you answer to the poll. Well, it's really nice because most of you are never heard about it, or you're just familiar with the concept and never used it. And it's nice to see that, because it means that you will this presentation will give you great value. So the topic for this webinar is OData, and we designed this presentation for both developers and product owners. Now, if you're a developer, I'm sure that you're going to enjoy the diagrams and the code snippets that we have prepared for you. But if you are a product owner, you will learn how OData enables your company, or to enable your company to adopt a strategy called API as a product. But no matter who you are, we hope that this presentation is also going to inspire you, because it's actually our story on how listening to a podcast on a bus actually got us to eating hot dogs on the streets of New York. So this is how it actually started. You're on
it
mute.
was summer, so it was pretty hot outside. And one morning we found in our inbox, let's call it a glove or a gauntlet, because I like to see receiving emails with challenges from our customers, like D'Artagnan received a different well, when he challenged all the other three musketeers. So, and they become friends. It's very similar because the customers usually come to us with challenges, and we try to give our best to help them and try to solve their problems. It was the same case here. We had a US-based customer that was behind schedule with the second version. They had performance issues after V1. They had maintainability issues, and yeah, the quality of the product was not the best. They had some nasty bugs, and yeah, their developers essentially were overwhelmed. They didn't know how they can evolve this product. So Razvan got to them, and yeah, he got them to our process.
Yeah, so actually every collaboration we have in Yonder starts with a process that we call the discovery. It's the part where we try to understand better, to find out more information about the customer, the challenge, the technology stack that is being used, and also the functionality that wants to be implemented. And after a couple of meetings, what we do is actually create a proposal for them, which contains not just the architecture or the technology stack, but also it includes everything from testing, roadmap, and also commercials. And after the proposal has been approved, we get into an inception phase where we try to validate both the collaboration, but also the technical solution. And we actually focus, because it's just a proof of concept, we focused on the items with the highest risk in the POC checklist. So this is usually a couple of months. And if everything goes okay with this POC, we get into the performing phase. And at this stage, it's just business as usual. We do start from the requirements, we develop it, we test it, and then we ship it in production. And of course, we provide support. Now, for the customer that Vlad was mentioning, we actually, yeah, we did this. We went to the same process with the discovery. So it was a customer in the catering industry. It was a .NET shop. Their application was actually a multi-tenant, and it was being developed, deployed in SaaS. It has, as you can see on the right-hand side, they were using a so-called three-layered architecture, where you have the controllers, the business logic, and also the data access. It was a very data-heavy application, and this is why, because later on they wanted to integrate with some third-party services, and not just consume it through their applications like web and mobile. They had to adopt this strategy called API as a product. So, of course, besides the architecture, we also had the chance to look a bit what's under the hood. So we noticed that they had a large traffic over the network, but between the web application and the REST API, and also the mobile application, the REST API. The database itself, it was quite struggling, and a static analysis using SonarQube, we discovered that 37% there was a lot of DTOs being duplicated. So basically, if it is to make a reference from a webinar that our CTO hosted a few months ago about innovating legacy products without rewriting them, we can say that this particular customer was in a transition phase between from a system of records to a system of engagement. Mainly, they were trying to create add-on modules like a mobile app and a web application on top of their existing system. And this allows them to have something like a modernized version of their application suite. Good.
So at the beginning, we promised that we will tell you a story that started essentially in a bus. Actually, it was M22. I was on my way to work in spring of 2019, and usually when I'm traveling from home to work, I like to listen to a podcast. And that day, I stepped upon a podcast on from Microsoft developers on the on.net playlist. It was about OData in ASP.NET Core. And it caught my attention because it was talking about very nice features on top of RESTful APIs. We'll talk later on about things like filtering, projections, and a lot of goodies. So after 20 minutes, the Hassan, the guy that was showcasing OData, really got me into actually proposing for a grant to grow project in Yonder, where I got 40 hours to actually look deeper into what OData could do and where it comes from. We can talk at the end if you're interested in what grant to grow represents, but I can tell you that after 40 hours, what I learned about OData is that essentially it's around since 2007 when it was called Project Astoria that Microsoft released. It became an OASIS standard in 2014, and it's an ISO standard since 2017. And since 2018, they already have a version that works with ASP.NET Core. Of course, there are other versions that work with ASP.NET Web API and with other technologies in the .NET world. And yeah, in March, Hassan had that podcast, and I was listening it from the bus. And in May, we've already evaluated it in the Grant to Grow program. Now, when we see it best fit is in applications or products that either want to expose their data to third-party services and integrations for different reasons. As we can see nowadays, I think it's a trend in all the software companies to expose APIs to allow customers, especially in the enterprise world, to offer access to their data, or companies that want to expose their data to multiple systems of engagement, different mobile apps, web apps, chatbots, anything that that we can call a system of engagement. And another reason why you would use the data on a web API is because it comes with opinionated rules on how to do REST. And it should improve your time to market when you're using it, because you're no longer spending time on implementing things like filtering, projection, pagination, bulk operations, and things like that, which usually it's really helpful. So yeah, this was the initial discovery of OData for us.
So now, if it is to go back to our initial story, after we went through that discovery phase, we got into a process where we created the proposal for them, and then we got into a meeting where we wanted to share with them the strategy that we proposed in order to get their API to the next level. And we got into the meeting, and then we started sharing some of our thoughts. One of them, as a main strategy, was to actually adopt OData. And because OData, as I said, is built, at least on the .NET, is built on top of the REST API, meaning that there is this concept called middleware in ASP.NET Core, which allows you to plug in any other middlewares, which will first change the request, but also the response. And this is where you can actually configure that OData. Of course, initially you have to add a reference to the OData package. You have to register the services for dependency injection. And the way you can enable the existing controllers to support OData functionality, basically you just provide this particular enable query. Now let's have a look at more in more details of what you'll have to do in order to extend your existing API with OData support. Basically, you'll have to create a model where you can define, hey, this is an entity called leaders. These leaders has a specific key to filter, and then you can provide all the operations that you want to support for that particular model. And the same thing for countries in this sense. After you do that, you also can have versioning support, as you can see here. But after you have this model definition, you have to do two things. One of them is to add the middleware itself, like add OData, and then of course if you want to have a batching support, like multiple requests in the same hitting multiple endpoints, but with the same request, there is the OData batching. The enable query I was mentioning in the previous slide, it's actually this one. So imagine like if before you didn't have this one, now you can enable it, and means that whenever this leaders list appears from the screen, you can have projections and things like that. Now, I've mentioned projections, and as you can see, one of our tactics was actually to clean the duplicated code. As I mentioned before, there was something like 37% of a lot of duplicated code in just one particular folder, which is the DTOs. Because what was actually happening? Imagine like you have in one page, you have this particular dropdown where you list, in our example, it is a list of leaders. So the way you're going to achieve this, because you need to provide a list from the database, you might have something like an endpoint/API/leader/summary. You provide the summary because you just want its ID or initial and its name. You don't want to fetch all the properties. Then in case you need to have a grid, then you're going to have another endpoint, which is detailed. And again, you have to provide another DTO that contains all the properties that you need. It might happen that sometimes you have 3 versions of it because you also want to have something like a collection inside of the leader. So it can get very duplicated depending on what's needed on your UI. So what OData can help you in this use case is that instead of implementing 2 endpoints, you implemented just one, like /API/leaders, but then using query strings, you can use, in this case, projections. And to do that, the way you do it is actually having something like $select, and then you just provide the properties that you want to fetch. And in our case, in the summary, it was just 2 properties like initial and name, and now I want to have 4 of them, right? So you don't, in this sense, you're going to have, instead of 2 DTOs, you're going to have just 1, and more than that is just 1 controller that is going to be, 1 controller endpoint that is going to handle this request instead of 2 endpoints, right? Which brings a lot of value. Having the same approach, there was another use case when it was the same entity, but was using in different context. For example, there was a page called leader list, and then you can see there are 4 columns, but in other use cases, it was a leader's activity, which contains other columns, right? Imagine even extreme cases where I, as a user, I would like to configure which are the columns I want to see for a particular entity. Well, if that's customizable, basically you can use the same projection mechanism, like you just select the columns or the properties that you need for that entity, which is name, country, start, end date, and here is date of birth and city, right? What this allows is that it's going to lower the network traffic. Instead of fetching 50 properties of the leaders and then, just throw away the others or not use them, you're going to fetch just the items that you need, just the properties that you need.
Here, you can imagine that you're very hungry and you're going to the store to buy food. And you know that when you're very hungry, you're going to buy essentially everything. And when you end up home, you prepare your meal, and you probably will throw 75% of what you've bought because you've bought too much because you are hungry. It's exactly the same with applications that are consuming APIs, RESTful APIs. You usually get way more than you need in one request. And the projections from OData help you actually retrieve exactly what you need for a particular screen.
Yep. Another thing that we wanted to improve, for at least for the front end itself, besides lowering the network traffic, is out of the box paging support. So what does it mean is that you can provide a skip and a top, or maybe you can use just a top or maybe just skip. And in case that you also want to fetch the total number, just to identify how many pages are there to display on the page, you just provide something like $count equals true, and this means that OData out of the box is going to provide you this value, but also the page with the results. And in our case, as you can see here, we actually went for the page number 3 because we skipped 20 items and then we asked for another 10. So it's page number 3. And by the way, as I said, this comes out of the box. You just provide the enable query and automatically the OData is gonna send to the browser or to the mobile app or to the consumer only those particular records.
Now,
yeah.
Another very nice feature from OData is filtering. So imagine that you have a page that has advanced filtering on it, as it is this case here, where you want to filter the leaders or presidents by country or by date of birth. And OData, what allows you is to use a query language that's very similar to SQL. So if your developers or the developers that are using your API are familiar with SQL, they will be able to write easily those filters, as you can do filters by that select only the year from a date, or to use a function that does to upper. You can do complex expressions with and, or you can use parentheses and things like that. And I'm pretty sure you've seen advanced filtering in e-commerce sites where you keep clicking on filters and the products available are changing. So that's very useful in situations like this, for example. And also it allows you to retrieve only the data that you need to the UI, and it's out of the box. I don't have to write my own grammar where I define how to say equal, greater than, greater or equal, and things like that. OData provides that for you, and it's documented in the standard, and that's the way it's implemented.
And by the way, this is going out of the box, meaning that just by enabling the query, it's gonna filter that one, those items for you.
Yeah. Now, how it does that and why does this help that filtering and the projections, why do they help us lower the database usage is, and this is specific for .NET implementations. I know that in Java, the Apache Lingo has an integration with JPA, but I don't know if it works exactly like this. I can tell you that in .NET, when it comes to an integration with anti-framework core or other ORMs, what happens actually is that the URL that you are sending from the browser, which has a select and the projections and the filter and an expand and the count and the order by, gets translated into what's called an expression tree. And an expression tree, as you can see in this diagram, essentially it's a representation of exactly as in compilers, when a parser is parsing the code, it's going to represent each expression and which are its parameters, what if it has constants, if it's a function, and so on and so forth. And expression trees in the .NET world are something that are behind, for example, a link queue and iQueryable. So that means that if the output from the OData filter or middleware as a pattern is an expression tree. It means that I can apply it directly to something that's iQueryable. And it means that this is going to be translated, then that iQueryable gets translated by entity framework into SQL. And you can see that I will get something like select, what I've added to the projection, where, and the mapping for the functions that I have in OData to first to what I have in .NET, and then from that to what I have in SQL or any other driver implemented by that ORM. So this is in big lines how it works. Now, what we also can do is do operations on collections. So in many applications, you have functionalities like delete all the records from a grid or from a list that respect a certain filter, or delete all the records between two dates, or even more, patch all the records that respect a certain filter with a certain value. This is a very good example where I just want to rename a name for a category for all the items that are in that category, for example. So yeah, these are use cases that happen especially in applications that are displaying or working with a lot of data. They are going to be very handy. So another feature that Razvan already mentioned is you can imagine that usually in URLs, if you end up with very complex queries, you either can reach the limit of a URL that either the browser or the server can parse. Or another example is if I have 3 dropdowns on a page and a grid, and they all need initial data. I'm not sure. In our example, I have a countries dropdown, I have a leaders dropdown, and in the list, I have something related to when the elections, let's say. And when I open the page, what's going to happen is that I'm going to make 3 requests from the browser to the server. And beside the fact that I'm using, I'm making too many requests when actually I can make only 1. And OData allows me to batch those 3 into only 1. I'm making a post request instead of 3 gets. And in the body of that post request, I'm saying that, okay, this is my get, this is the second get, the third get, or the nth get that I want to do. And this both optimizes the connections that the app is using from the browser, so that I can retrieve in the meantime pictures or other JavaScript libraries or things like that. Now, how do you enable that? You first need to add on the route the handler and for batching, and also you need to register the batching middleware that's going to spread those 3 requests, actually 1 request in multiple requests in your controller, and also that middleware depends on routes. So yeah, it's also out of the box. You just need to do these configurations and make the requests. Nothing else changes in your controllers.
Now, what it actually happened is that we were somewhere in the middle of the presentation, and then the director of engineering actually stopped us and said, "Hey guys, I'm not sure if this is going to work." So right after that, he started enumerating some of his concerns. Now, one of them was related to the performance, because basically, if you allow the client application, the application that is consuming the data from the API, basically they can provide something like top 10 million, and then it means that it's going to fetch the data from 10 million records from the database, right? More than that, they can sort or filter based on a column that it's not supposed to be sorted on because you don't have indices of that column in the database. So that is actually going to create some performance penalty on the database level. There were also some concerns about, in terms of security, because you can apply some kind of DDoS attack just by providing inside the filter, you provide something like 30 filters. And of course, the database, the SQL that is going to be generated is going to contain all those filters. And in that sense, again, it's going to be very slow for the database to perform such a request. Then another thing was related to the documentation, because, okay, we have this in place, but how do we send for our third-party APIs all the filters that are going to be support, all the sorting and things like that? And lastly, there was a concern about, okay, we have this OData, but why not using the GraphQL, right?
We were really happy to hear the concerns, and I know it sounds strange, but the reason why we were happy to hear these concerns is because we were kind of prepared for this, and we knew that OData fixes most of the issues that the director of engineering raised to us, and I'll tell you one by one how it does that. Now, regarding how you do top 10 million, or that I can filter by any property of your DTO, and that will affect for sure the performance of the database, and because I don't have an index on it. What the data allows me is to add configurations at the level of each property of my model. So first of all, I can enable at the level of each model, what operations do I allow? Select projections, filtering, pagination, what's the maximum top that I'm allowing, what's the size of a page, if I allow expand, count, so everything gets configurable. And then again, at the collection level, I can do the same. Or if I have child entities, I can configure for that navigation property how to behave. And the nice thing is that if a user of your API sends a filter using, I'm not sure, the property city in this example, OData is going to return status code 400, and it's going to tell you nicely that, I'm sorry, but this API, it's not allowing you to filter by property city. So it's protecting your API without getting to the database or anywhere near the controller.
And basically, you can have the two approaches, right? The white box and the black, the whitelist and the blacklist approach, right?
Yes. Now, in terms of documentation, as we've already mentioned, OData is a standard. So, and beside the standard of querying and things like that, OData inside it has a standard for how you define the models, or how are they represented both in JSON and XML format. And that's called Common Schema Definition Language, or CSDL for OData. And what's even nicer about it is that OASIS has a mapping, a standard mapping between the CSDL standard and the OpenAPI standard. So, and there are implementations, of course, that allow you to generate from a CSDL document that's going to result from the model that we've shown you before that you're configuring with your entities. You can generate an OpenAPI JSON that can be ingested by Swagger, and you can end up with the screen that you can see on the right-hand side, where for the countries endpoint, you can select the top, skip, filters, and things like that with drop-downs for order by, and yeah, nice things. But that's if you want to go with the OpenAPI JSON standard, because any OData implementation will have a $, metadata endpoint exposed by it that shows you the definition of your model for all the entities, endpoints, and in both JSON and XML format. And from that, for example, if you have a .NET client, with just 2 clicks, you're generating your client that, by the way, works with LinkU. So I can do LinkU on a .NET client, on an API, on a RESTful API, and it works seamlessly. Now, when we compare it to GraphQL, please keep in mind that the comparison is in the context of this customer. So this was
pretty much, this is a subject for another talk, right?
Yeah, I mean,
real details, but at least let's just focus for this particular customer. What was our thought?
So it was a .NET shop, right? That's why you can see here that OData has a very good support for .NET, and because it was built by Microsoft since 2007, it's present in the community since that time. So there is a chance to have developers that actually used it in the past, if from the .NET world. It's on top of RESTful APIs, which is it's also human readable, and it's something that's very popular and very used across the industry. It comes with out-of-the-box pagination, filtering, and sorting. Now, if we are looking at the GraphQL side, it's an RPC. It doesn't have out-of-the-box filtering, paging, and sorting, but they have there are guidelines in the industry in their documentation on something like how to define yourself a grammar that allows you to do something similar. On the other side, if you're looking in the JavaScript community, GraphQL for sure is going to be with you'll find more developers with experience and know how to use it. If we are looking at the resolvers from GraphQL, even though in .NET I've seen that there are certain implementations and integrations with anti-framework that allow you to avoid the N+1 problem generated by resolvers, where you still have the issue where you retrieve from the database more than what you expose on the API side. Whereas because of how data it's built in .NET with the expression trees, it's native to where it's out of the box without any other extra libraries going to allow you to put that into anti-framework and to create SQL out of it. And on top of it, OData, it's a standard. It's going to be there and it's going to stay because it's an OASIS and ISA standard. Although GraphQL also has a GraphQL foundation, but it's not yet considered a standard.
Yep, and actually everything went well after the proposal because it was actually accepted. And then we got into the POC phase. We validated our thoughts, and then after that we got into the implementation of the OData in the REST API. And what is really nice is that in our collaboration, we have this best practice where we try to visit each other at least once per year. And it was really nice because also in the initial phase of collaboration with this particular customer, we actually managed to visit them in Boston. And of course, we also spent one day in a rainy day, actually in New York. So it was really nice to see how, Vlad just listening in Cluj to a podcast, the story got us to New York. Good. Hope you like this talk. Now, before sending you the closing poll, I would like to see if you want to have a follow-up session, maybe a hands-on workshop where we can adopt OData on a real-world application. Now, what I can give you a tip about what kind of real-world application can be used. So there is this concept called real-world app. Just search for GitHub. And these guys, they created a real world application which looks like a medium.com clone, So the one where you can publish an article and things like that. But what they did, they actually created a front end and a back end, and for each one, for each front end and for each back end, that it was there are multiple projects created in different technologies. So now, if we, for example, we want to see all the front ends that have been used for this, we can just click on this one. Let's see if it loads. Right, so now you can see an Android native for this particular app, an Angular, React, all the technology. So if you really want to see how a particular technology can be used to implement a real-world application which contains a lot of things, then you can do that. So what we can recommend is, okay, if you have a technology that you want to test or a pattern, maybe, I don't know, you want to use the Onion architecture, or you might want to use OData, just go to the backend, and then inside it, maybe choose for Java or for C# and try to implement that particular. So there is one which is using, for example, ASP.NET Core. You can use this one and just play around with it to see how it goes. If you want to test with microservices architecture as well, you can start it from here. So now let's open a closing poll and see if you are interested in a hands-on workshop about, adding OData to one of these projects. And while you're answering, I think we can take a few questions. We are a bit over time, but it's still...
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So there is, the first question came from Monica.
Yep.
So she's asking, how do you handle sensitive private data in the request URL? For example, you want to bring data for a certain patient code, but the patient code is considered sensitive data which should not be exposed in a URL request. Well, what you can do with the data, beside the batch endpoint, which I mentioned that in a batch request, you're putting actually the query in the body of a post, and that's for multiple requests. There is also the possibility, there is another endpoint called, a URL is /$query, that again, it's going to be hosted on a post request, and you can put inside it only one request if you want. It's also for the case where you have complex queries that wouldn't fit in your URL. So to answer your question, you can, instead of putting the query in the URL, you can put it in the body of a request, either on the /$query endpoint, or to batch it alongside other requests on the /$batch endpoint.
That's a very good question. Yeah, thanks, Monica. There's another question from Alex. Can OData be used for services that span across multiple database schemas? Well, yes, but you're not going to have the entity framework support out of the box, right? I mean, you cannot have like, I don't know, if there is any kind of reference between two entities, well, you're not going to be able to do that. However, you can take maybe parts of the entity from one database and some other parts of the entity from the other database, and then have the mapping doing it by yourself. That's actually possible. And then the projection that is coming from the outside, it's just gonna eliminate the fields in the response, but you're still gonna fetch the full data set from each one of the databases. So that's actually a good use case. You can actually do that, of course, and merge the data between multiple. You can have something like extract some information from a data service, something like you call a SAS, or you call another endpoint, fetch the data, and then merge it in using a mapper or some kind of a merger tool between multiple services or things like that. So it's not really OData. It's not just for relational databases. You can fetch data from files, you can fetch data from everywhere. It's just another tips and tricks in case that you're having entity framework. It works really nice, but they are not really related. They don't have to work together. Good. Let's see if you have yeah, let's see. Oh, very interested and somewhat interested. Really nice. Wow. In this case, I think it would be nice if we can organize this kind of workshop. Of course, it's gonna take some time, but I think it's gonna be fun. So having a podcast with this, I think it's doable. Good. Looks like we don't have any other question. Maybe we should wait for maybe Vlad. Meanwhile, you said that you might want to share a bit about the Grant to Grow program that we have.
Yeah, well, essentially, Yonder's employees are having a benefit called the Grant to Grow, and what we do is each year we organize these sessions where everyone can pitch an idea on what they want to study in order that would help them grow, and they're based on some criteria like how much value does it bring to the company and to the person that has done the proposal. We are going to grant that person the joy of spending 40 hours getting their dream about technology accomplished. And out of it, we usually also get extremely good knowledge about things like OData, where other techniques or technologies were, and it's not only limited to developers, everyone participates, QA, RAs, UI, UX. So yeah, it's a really nice program.
So it's a different approach of, it is actually a different approach of learning new things. One of them is to have something like hackathon, but that's more like compact and very focused to finish something. Here to Grant to Grow is just learning new things, but also something that can be benefit for either the individual or for the company. Yeah, we have one new question from Stefan. Can you use OData for real-time updates? I'm not sure if it supports something like WebSockets, if it has been designed for WebSockets updates or things like that.
Well,
Does it?
if you mean, I mean, if we think about what GraphQL offers as subscriptions, we can compare it with the Delta queries that OData offers. So essentially, they have a mechanism where you can get a token based on which you'll get the changes since your last request. This is how this is what's in the OData standard as defined and implemented in .NET.
So this means that the client will have to do maybe a polling,
yes.
Like, hey, every 5 seconds, and it's not going to ask for the entire data. It's going to ask something like, hey, give me what was changed since the last time I called. It's
Exactly.
just the data. There is another question from Catalin. Do you happen to know the implementation of the standard for other programming languages like Java?
For Java, I know about Apache Lingo, and I know that they also have a JavaScript implementation for it too. These are this is something that I've seen as that has a community around it, and yeah, it's worth looking into.
Do you know if it has a nice integration with Hibernate as well, like the same way it has in .NET with Entity Framework?
What I've seen is an integration with JPA, not with. I am not aware of an integration with Hibernate.
Okay. Good. Great. It looks like we don't have any other questions. Well, I hope you enjoyed this talk, and I hope that yeah, maybe you're listening this on YouTube, like a podcast. Maybe you're on a bus somewhere, and hopefully this can take you somewhere nice. Good. Thank you very much, and hope we can see us tomorrow for the next topic, for the next session, which is about Kubernetes. So
thank you very much for your time.